Hey everybody, Andrew here, and I just wanted to take a quick moment before the show to say thank you so much for being such great listeners. And if what you're listening to you think is really good, by all means go out and write a review. It would really mean the world to Mustafa and I. And if for whatever reason you may be busy or just forget, that's cool too. But then if you think someone else could benefit from this content as well, please just share it with them. I'm sure that they would really appreciate that if you think it would be helpful for them. I also want to give a quick shout out to Jason. Jason, thanks so much for reaching out and letting me know how you felt about the last episode with Nicholas about Twitter and tips on that. And also glad to hear that your family and loved ones are doing well in light of the coronavirus breakout. So, all right, that's all I have for you guys. Thanks again for being such great listeners, and let's get to the show. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, going to be one of your hosts today along with Mustafa Price, and today we're going to be talking about how to keep your community healthy in episode 124. So, the steps of creating a community can be a challenge in itself, but community management can be something completely different in itself. While there are some great perks that come with a community, there can also be some potential pitfalls that lead to disgruntled community members. Thankfully, our guest today is able to shed some light on how to address situations that may arise and ways to circumvent or resolve conflict surrounding difficult community members. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everybody, and we're back, and today we are with Jenny Windom from Rose City Games. Jenny, how's it going?
It's going great. How are you all doing?
Good. And we also have Mustafa here, as I mentioned earlier. Mustafa, how's your week been going so far?
Oh, it has been fantastic, Andrew. Thanks for asking.
No problem, man. So, Jenny, we're really glad that you're on the show with us today, and I'm just going to hand it over to you real quick. If you would kindly share a little bit more about what you do for Rose City Games, and if you can maybe give a little bit more about yourself in terms of things you like to do outside of work.
Yeah. It's always funny when people ask, like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, where do I start? So I am the community developer for Rose City Games. And so that kind of entails me wearing a wide variety of hats depending on the day and time and like where the moon sits in the sky. I'm not sure. And so that means certain days I'll be working on organizing for different events that we're showcasing our games at, reaching out to press and content creators to perhaps play our game or if they're interested in covering our titles. Some days I'm focused more on our social media channels or our Discord. We just started streaming, so that's been really fun.
Oh, nice.
And other days I'm helping, like, even on the production side of the game, which is games that we're working on, which is really nice. So helping, doing some QA, some testing, providing feedback on the narrative. It really changes up day to day, which I personally find really fulfilling. So yeah, that's what I do in a nutshell.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. It's personally, it's actually my dream job, which is, I mean, I can't say enough good things about like the folks I work with as well. I mean, they're just wonderful people. And so outside of work, I really, really like video games. So I play games outside of work, both just on like a personal level as well as on a stream. So I stream a couple days a week. I also create videos that focus on indie games. So yeah, I kind of live and breathe indie games, whether I'm at work or not.
Yeah, that is definitely awesome. It's good to hear that. Like for a while, I've always been really busy with things, but in light of how everything is now, I've been making some changes myself and playing a little bit more games, and I am contemplating streaming. I don't think I'll ever get to it really, or maybe at some point, but the thought has crossed my mind. But yeah, I love that you just live and breathe this stuff, so that's always great to hear.
Yeah, Yeah.
If you're listening and you want to see Andrew stream, make sure to blow us up on Twitter and everying. See if we can make it happen.
Oh man, oh that might be
Challenge that
interesting.
we're throwing out.
Uh-oh. This is what I do to get myself into these things. Anyways, so all right, we're going to continue on, and Mustafa, I'm going to let you handle this one, buddy. So why don't you just let Jenny into what she's ready, these questions that she's going to be ready to answer.
So, Jenny, before we jump into the main discussion, we're going to go through what's called the Q Box round. It's basically some quick icebreaker questions just to give us and our listeners kind of an impression of a little bit more about you.
Awesome. I feel like I'm on a game show.
I mean, it basically is. It's got the fancy name and everything. So,
yeah.
So to start, favorite superhero?
Ooh. Okay. I just watched Into the Spider-Verse, so I'm going to say nice. Spider-Man right now.
Oh, that's like the objectively correct answer.
Yeah. One for one.
So, dogs or cats?
Oh, that's a tough one. Cats, when it comes down to it. But I'm an animal person, for sure.
Nice.
Nice. Okay, through and through. I like it. Trains, planes, or boats for a preferred mode of travel?
I would have to say trains, because it's like the Hogwarts Express. Definitely gives me that vibe. And then you also don't have to go through TSA and stand in long lines. So much more pleasant of a journey, I would have to say.
Yeah, okay. And so, I hate to make you compare the two, but apples or oranges?
Oh, that's actually a really hard one. Let's go with oranges, because I'm all about that citrus, that nice sort of citrusy flavors.
Okay, excellent. And then the last question, what are you playing right now?
Like, I would say probably 90% of the world, definitely Animal Crossing.
I knew it.
Yeah, it's a very on-brand game for me. Playing a lot of Animal Crossing, but also dabbling. I finished Final Fantasy VII Remake, and so I'm replaying it now.
You're replaying it? Wow.
I am replaying it on hard mode, and it's given me a nice challenge, is what I can say. But yeah, I like finished Final Fantasy VII Remake in like the span of one weekend. I was
that's awesome.
Obsessed.
Yeah, that's definitely I'm definitely behind the curve on that one, but I know for a fact it's coming down the line soon. I'm going to have to pick it up. I've only heard good things, and I never played the original, so.
Oh my goodness. I know it's not quite on brand with the indie game stuff, but if you ever do a spoiler cast, I will tune into that, because so much to talk about.
Yeah, it's so funny though, because I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan, and I never buy games at full price except for maybe that franchise. So I did that, and there was no regular copies, but I had no problem buying like the deluxe edition or whatever came with it. But then I think the next tier up was like $300, and you get a Cloud on a Bike action figure. I'm like, that's a bit much, but it was worth it. I was
tempted as well.
Right. Sure, many of us were, but
I mean,
that's a bit steep.
They know their audience. Okay?
They do. They definitely do.
They're selling to people who would pay that much for Cloud on a Bike.
Well, I'm super tempted by, I don't know if you saw like the soundtrack, the special like first edition. I forget. I don't think it was a vinyl. I think it was just CD pack, but there was a first edition CD collection for like $70 some odd, and I'm like, I don't need this, but
I would consider it, because
definitely. I think the soundtrack CD is a weakness of mine for sure.
Yep, ditto.
All right, so I do want to now kind of transition into what's going to be our main topic for the day, which is how to keep your community healthy. Fairly multifaceted topic. To give a sense of the direction we're headed. We've spoken previously on the show about ways to develop and manage a community, but we'd also like to explore some of the more challenging angles of that, particularly ways to handle perhaps disgruntled community members or avoiding any sort of potential pitfalls. So we're kind of hoping to dig into how to address those situations, things that you found have worked for you in the past, and basically ways in which we can, keep the community healthy. To kind of revisit the domain. So to start, it takes a lot to build a good community, as I'm sure you're well aware. But in spite of this, it can still, be kind of challenging to have that level of maintenance. Especially when you've got potential involvement of internet trolling and kind of that component of social media and the way it plays in. Could you perhaps describe an instance where you've encountered this?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I was trying to, think about instances where I have personally encountered like trolling in our communities, or even just like on the internet as a whole, as a community developer. And to be very honest, I think I'm in the minority and very lucky in that we haven't had too many instances that have really stood out to me in terms of like horrible, like vagrant troll instances. We haven't had anything major and like impactful in that way to happen in our communities. Of course it is the internet, and we've had smaller instances, and perhaps this is more common for indie games in general, where maybe we don't have like a huge thing happen, but occasionally we'll have like kids jump in thinking that, they've learned how to use curse words on the internet and they want to try it, in a new space. Or, you get the yahoos who are just kind of like looking to just find reactions in people. And I think that's where we normally see a lot of that type of behavior, is when people will like pop in and sort of test the waters to see if it's a space that they can do something like that, and either pull a reaction or, I don't know. Yeah, just mostly pull a reaction. And fortunately, it's all been very easy for me and for the Rose City community to kind of easily push that aside and like kind of get it out.
So I think that's something interesting you kind of mentioned right there, is like someone entering the community and trying to, basically get a reaction. And because I think a lot of people, in general, indie devs, they always fear that, what do I do if there's someone who's blatantly dislikes something about like the gameplay or something else or whatever. But for you to say that someone is basically pulling or looking for a reaction, I think it's good for people to understand and know that in most cases, at least from my experience, that's what trolls are kind of looking for, right?
Right. Yeah, I think, and I found, usually, and it's nice because you can turn that into perhaps a person who becomes an advocate and a positive member of your community, because sometimes, not all the time, for sure, but occasionally you can tell when someone perhaps is like looking for a reaction because they just like don't have other communities that they're participating in. And sometimes you can immediately tell, like, this is just a troll that is definitely not coming in with good intent. I'm just going to instantly kick them. I'm not even going to worry about it. And so I think part of it, and maybe I should have mentioned this earlier when talking about some of my experience, but before going into community in the games industry, I also worked as a middle school and high school teacher. So
cool.
A lot of that was really interesting, sort of like an in-person testing ground for community management, because in a school, you're with the same group of students, day in and day out, and you are developing a community. And that's not unlike a small scale or a sort of more intimate scale of what you would see in an indie Discord or just in any community online. And so I think that has helped me learn to balance that sense of empathy with someone who's coming in, perhaps testing the waters just to see and maybe could be talked to, versus someone who is coming in to be an absolute troll where you just know to kind of just send them on their way because you don't want to give them that reaction that they're looking for.
That's awesome. I can't wait to tell my wife this, because she's a middle school teacher. So I'm going to let her know that she has a potential career in community management if she decides to change.
If she ever wanted it. No, it really, I think it's interesting because I've gotten a lot of questions from folks about, like, how do you become a community manager? I love doing it. And honestly, this is the expensive route, but if you have ever had experience in a classroom, I feel like you at least have a good sense of what it may be like to facilitate a community of folks online. And if you have done it with middle schoolers, that is just